This is the story of Ethan Parker, a small-town mechanic whose life of struggle took an unimaginable turn when he won the $1.2 billion Mega Millions jackpot. But what happened next wasn't just about the money, it was about the choices that changed everything. If you like this story, please subscribe, like and share. In a quaint suburb of Denver, Colorado, lived Ethan Parker, a 35-year-old man who worked tirelessly as a mechanic in a local garage. Life wasn't exactly kind to Ethan. He had grown up in a lower-middle-class household and learned early on that dreams often come second to responsibilities. His mother, a retired schoolteacher, and his younger sister, Clara, relied on him for support. With bills piling up and no clear way forward, Ethan felt stuck in an unending cycle of work and worry. The garage where Ethan worked was always bustling with activity. He fixed engines, replaced tires, and handled customer complaints with a quiet resilience. His colleagues admired his dedication, but they also knew he carried a heavy burden. Every month, Ethan barely managed to scrape together enough money to cover rent, medical bills for his mother's arthritis, and tuition fees for Clara's community college. Yet, Ethan had a peculiar habit: he loved playing the lottery. Every Friday after work, he would stop by the same convenience store on Maple Street, buy a Mega Million lottery ticket, and daydream about what life could be like if he ever won. It wasn't that Ethan believed he would win, he knew the odds were astronomically low. But for a few moments, those numbers on the ticket represented hope, a sliver of possibility that maybe, just maybe, his life could change. One chilly November evening, as the first snowflakes of the season dusted the streets of Denver, Ethan found himself at the convenience store once again. The clerk, Mrs. Ramirez, greeted him with a warm smile. "Another ticket, Ethan?" she asked, handing him the slip. "Why not?" he replied, chuckling softly. "It's cheaper than therapy." Ethan walked home, his ticket folded neatly in his pocket. He couldn't help but fantasize about what he would do with the money. He imagined buying a cozy house for his family, paying off Clara's student loans, and maybe even opening his own auto repair shop. But as soon as he stepped into his modest apartment, reality set in. The heater was acting up again, and his mother's arthritis seemed worse than ever in the cold weather. That weekend, Ethan barely had time to think about the lottery. The garage was busier than usual, with people rushing to get their cars winter-ready. By the time he got home each night, he was too exhausted to do anything but eat a quick meal and collapse into bed. On Tuesday evening, after a particularly grueling day at work, Ethan remembered the ticket. He flipped on the TV just in time to catch the lottery numbers being announced. Sitting on the couch with a cup of instant coffee in hand, he unfolded the ticket and began checking the numbers. 17. 23. 41, Ethan read aloud, his heart beating a little faster with each match. By the time he got to the final number, he was holding his breath. Mega Ball, 12. The room fell silent. For a moment, Ethan thought he must be imagining things. He double-checked the ticket, then triple-checked it. The numbers were an exact match. His hands trembled as he stared at the ticket. It couldn't be real. Grabbing his phone, Ethan quickly searched for the jackpot amount. His jaw dropped when he saw the figure, $1.2 billion. Ethan sat in stunned silence, the ticket clutched tightly in his hand. His entire life, every struggle, every sleepless night, every moment of doubt, had led to this improbable, life-changing moment. But even as the initial wave of disbelief washed over him, a new thought began to take root: what would he do now? Ethan's entire world shifted the moment he realized he had the winning ticket. For several minutes, he sat frozen on the couch, his mind spinning with disbelief and exhilaration. But as the shock began to wear off, a new sensation crept in: fear. What did he need to do next? Could he trust anyone? Would his life ever be the same? The first step was verifying the ticket. Ethan barely slept that night, constantly checking the numbers and the date on the ticket to ensure he hadn't made a mistake. At dawn, he called in sick to work for the first time in years and headed to the Colorado Lottery headquarters. Ethan felt out of place among the towering glass windows and modern furniture of the lottery office. His oil-stained jacket and work boots seemed like a stark contrast to the sharp suits and polished floors around him. When his turn came, he hesitated before handing the ticket to the clerk behind the counter. "Congratulations," the clerk said after a moment of verification. "You're our Mega Million jackpot winner." Ethan's legs almost gave out beneath him. The clerk explained the process. He could take the full $1.2 billion spread over 30 years or accept a lump sum of $600 million after taxes. Ethan chose the latter. The sheer size of the amount didn't seem real. The days that followed were a whirlwind. A financial advisor assigned by the lottery office walked him through setting up a trust to manage the money and ensure his anonymity as much as possible. Ethan had never imagined needing a lawyer or an accountant, but suddenly, he had a team of professionals guiding him through decisions he didn't even know existed. The first thing Ethan did was pay off all his family's debts. His mother cried when he handed her the title to a new house he had purchased outright. Clara was speechless when he told her she could transfer to any university she wanted, no loans, no worries. For himself, Ethan bought a modest 3-bedroom home on the outskirts of Denver and a brand new truck to replace his rusted-out pickup. It wasn't extravagant, but it felt like a reward for years of hard work. But as the weeks went on, Ethan realized that wealth brought its own set of challenges. News of his win eventually leaked, despite his attempts to keep it quiet. His phone was flooded with calls from distant relatives and acquaintances, all eager to reconnect or ask for financial help. He received letters and emails from strangers pleading for money to cover medical bills, mortgages, and business ventures. Ethan's small circle of friends began to act differently, too. Some joked about his newfound fortune, asking if he would lend a hand with their car payments or buy them expensive gifts. Others seemed resentful, pulling away as if his success had created an unbridgeable gap between them. One evening, Ethan found himself sitting alone in his new house, staring at the unopened stack of letters on his kitchen table. The noise of his new reality was overwhelming. He had everything he had ever dreamed of, yet something felt off. The simplicity of his old life, the routine of work, the camaraderie of his colleagues, the quiet satisfaction of small joys, seemed like a distant memory. He decided to reach out to someone he trusted, Mr. Jacobs, the owner of the garage where he had worked for over a decade. Over a cup of coffee at the old diner they used to frequent, Ethan poured his heart out. "You know, Ethan," Mr. Jacobs said, "money doesn't change who you are, it just magnifies it. You're a hard-working, honest man. Don't let the weight of all this crush you. Use it to do some good, for yourself and others." Ethan nodded, the words sinking in. He realized that while money had changed his circumstances, it didn't have to change his values. He needed to take control of his new life, set boundaries, and focus on what truly mattered. Ethan left the diner with Mr. Jacobs' words echoing in his mind, "Use it to do some good, for yourself and others." For the first time since his win, he felt a sense of direction. The money was no longer just a windfall, it was an opportunity to build something meaningful, something lasting. The next few weeks were spent in deep reflection. Ethan knew he didn't want his life to spiral into the chaos he'd read about in stories of other lottery winners, broken relationships, reckless spending, and eventual regret. He wanted his fortune to make a positive impact, not only on his family but also on the community that had shaped him. ####A promise to family. Ethan began by focusing on his family. His first major project was turning his mother's new house into a true home. He hired contractors to install ramps and other modifications to make it easier for her to move around despite her arthritis. He also arranged for a full-time caregiver so she could focus on enjoying life rather than battling her condition alone. For Clara, he went beyond just paying her tuition. He encouraged her to pursue her dream of studying environmental science at a top university. To his surprise, Clara expressed a desire to return to Denver after graduation to work on sustainability projects for their hometown. "This isn't just about me, Ethan," Clara said during one of their conversations. "I want to make a difference here, where we grew up." Her words inspired Ethan to think bigger. ####A vision for the community. Ethan had lived his entire life in a working-class neighborhood where people struggled just to make ends meet. He wanted to give back in a way that would lift others up, the way he had always dreamed someone would do for him. With the help of his financial advisor, Ethan set up a foundation aimed at community development. The first initiative was a vocational training center for mechanics, electricians, and other trades. Ethan remembered how his job at the garage had given him purpose and stability. He wanted others to have the same opportunity. Next, he funded the renovation of the local high school, which had been struggling with outdated facilities and underpaid teachers. He made sure to remain anonymous in these contributions, not wanting the focus to be on him but on the people benefiting from the changes. Ethan also worked with local officials to create a scholarship program for underprivileged students, ensuring that young people from the area had access to higher education without the burden of debt. ###Facing new challenges. As Ethan's projects gained momentum, he encountered challenges he hadn't anticipated. Some community members questioned his motives, suspecting he had ulterior reasons for his generosity. Others outright rejected his help, insisting they didn't need charity. The weight of expectations also became a constant struggle. People assumed he had endless resources and could solve every problem. Ethan realized he had to set boundaries and accept that he couldn't please everyone. Despite these hurdles, he pressed on, focusing on the positive outcomes. The vocational training center was soon bustling with activity, providing dozens of people with new skills and job placements. The high school renovations were completed ahead of schedule, and the first round of scholarships had already helped 15 students enroll in college. ###Finding personal fulfillment. Through it all, Ethan didn't lose sight of himself. He carved out time for hobbies he had long neglected, like woodworking and hiking in the Rockies. He reconnected with old friends who appreciated him for who he was, not for his newfound wealth. One day, while working on a custom bookshelf for his mother's house, Ethan reflected on how far he had come. He realized that the true value of his win wasn't just the money, it was the chance to rewrite his story and help others do the same. As the sun set over Denver that evening, Ethan felt a sense of peace he hadn't experienced in years. He had turned his fortune into something far greater than he ever imagined, a legacy of hope, opportunity, and community. Ethan quickly realized that winning the lottery didn't just change his financial status, it altered the way people treated him. Almost overnight, he became a magnet for attention. Old friends, distant relatives, and even strangers reached out, each with their own reasons for reconnecting. Some genuinely cared about him, but many others saw an opportunity to benefit from his newfound wealth. Ethan's closest group of friends initially celebrated his success with genuine excitement. They threw him a small party at their favorite diner, where they joked about how he'd finally afford to buy them dinner. But over time, the dynamic began to shift. One of his oldest friends, Mike, started making offhand comments about Ethan's spending. "Must be nice to live without a budget," he'd say with a forced laugh. Another friend, Lisa, began dropping hints about her financial troubles, hoping Ethan would offer to help. Ethan didn't mind helping where he could, but the expectation weighed on him. Eventually, Ethan noticed that some friends stopped calling altogether. He heard through mutual acquaintances that they felt he had outgrown them. This hurt more than he expected. The flood of letters and messages from strangers continued, and some were heartbreaking, families pleading for help with medical bills, single parents asking for assistance with rent, and veterans seeking funds to start small businesses. Ethan wanted to help everyone, but he knew it wasn't possible. He hired a team to vet requests, focusing on legitimate needs that aligned with his goals. Even so, the guilt of saying no weighed heavily on him. Some people reacted poorly, accusing him of being selfish or uncaring. The hardest betrayal came from someone Ethan thought he could trust, an old acquaintance who approached him with a business idea. The man claimed to have a solid plan for a tech startup and convinced Ethan to invest $100,000. Months later, Ethan discovered that the startup didn't exist, and the man had disappeared with the money. Despite the challenges, Ethan also discovered who truly valued him for who he was, not for his money. Clara, his sister, remained his rock. She reminded him that their shared struggles growing up had shaped their values and that he didn't owe anyone an explanation for protecting his boundaries. One unexpected connection came from a woman named Rachel, who worked as a project manager for one of his foundation's community initiatives. Rachel admired Ethan's dedication to giving back and treated him no differently than she would anyone else. Her grounded nature and honest perspective quickly became a source of comfort for Ethan. During a long conversation one evening after a community event, Rachel told him, "Money doesn't define character. How you choose to use it does. And from what I've seen, you're doing just fine." Her words stayed with Ethan, reminding him that he wasn't responsible for everyone's expectations, only for staying true to himself. Ethan began to approach relationships with more intention. He reconnected with people who had drifted away, explaining how overwhelmed he had felt and how much he valued their friendship. For those who couldn't accept the new boundaries he set, Ethan learned to let go without guilt. He also started focusing on building new relationships through his foundation. Working with community leaders, students, and volunteers gave him a sense of belonging and purpose. These connections were based not on wealth but on a shared vision for a better future. As Ethan navigated these changes, he realized that while wealth had complicated his relationships, it had also taught him who truly mattered. It wasn't about the size of his bank account, it was about the people who stood by him, through every high and low. Years had passed since Ethan Parker won the Mega Millions jackpot, and his life had transformed in ways he never could have imagined. The initial thrill of sudden wealth had faded, replaced by a deep sense of purpose. Ethan had built something much bigger than his own success, a legacy that would impact his family, his community, and the generations to come. As Ethan sat on the porch of his new home, gazing out at the mountains in the distance, he reflected on his journey. The once struggling mechanic who had fantasized about a better life was now a philanthropist, a mentor, and a well-respected member of his community. The money, which once seemed like the answer to all his problems, had merely served as a catalyst for a much larger transformation. His foundation was thriving, and the vocational training center had become a model for similar programs across the country. He had funded scholarships that had enabled dozens of young people to pursue their dreams, many of whom had already returned to the community to make a difference of their own. The high school he helped renovate had become one of the top-rated schools in the district, with improved facilities and new programs designed to equip students for the challenges of the future. Ethan's family was thriving, too. His mother, who had once struggled with arthritis and a sense of isolation, now had the freedom to enjoy her life in the comfort of a fully accessible home. Clara, his younger sister, had graduated from college with honors and had taken over several environmental initiatives that Ethan had started, pushing the boundaries of sustainable development in their town. She was a young woman filled with passion and determination, carrying forward the values Ethan had instilled in her. Despite the changes in his life, Ethan had never lost touch with his roots. He spent his weekends volunteering at the vocational training center, mentoring young people who reminded him of his younger self. He had formed deep, lasting relationships with many of the students, sharing his story of struggle and perseverance to encourage them to keep going, no matter how difficult their circumstances seemed. But perhaps the most significant growth came in the way he viewed his relationships with others. He had learned the hard way that money could bring people into your life who weren't there for the right reasons. Over the years, he had become skilled at setting boundaries, saying no when necessary, and focusing on the connections that truly mattered. He had reconnected with old friends and mended relationships that had been strained by jealousy or misunderstanding. Some people had walked away, but Ethan had learned that not every relationship was meant to last, and that was okay. Now, sitting with his family and close friends, Ethan felt content. The path ahead was still uncertain, but for the first time in years, he was at peace with the life he had built. He had used his wealth to bring about real change in the world, but he had also used it to become the person he always wanted to be, someone who valued integrity, generosity, and meaningful relationships over superficial success. Clara, now a young woman with dreams of her own, turned to Ethan one evening at a family gathering. "You know," she said, "you've changed so many lives, but I think the biggest impact you've had is on me. You taught me what it means to live with purpose." Ethan smiled, his heart full. He had always hoped that his success would be a platform for something greater, but hearing Clara's words reminded him that the true reward was seeing the next generation carry on the lessons he had learned the hard way. As the sun set over the horizon, Ethan felt the weight of his journey in the best possible way, a weight that was no longer a burden, but a source of pride. He had come full circle, from struggling mechanic to millionaire philanthropist, from a man consumed by fear and uncertainty to one who embraced his purpose and made a lasting impact. Ethan's story wasn't just about winning the lottery. It was about what he did with that win, a reminder that true wealth comes not from money, but from the legacy you leave behind. Thank you for watching my YouTube channel Storytime. Please don't forget like, subscribe and share.